before I went to prison, I lived a lifestyle. I did a lot of things that I'm not proud of with regards to rivalry, gang warfare, that stuff. I never been into robbing or stealing or anything like that, but I was into violence. I was into that, because I come from a lot of trauma, so I came from that. But ultimately, I was convicted. I was convicted and sentenced to 45 years of life. I was convicted of murder, and in prison, um, I stayed on the highest level you can be on all my life, on general population, from up north to down south, and then I made it home in 2016.
What's it like now?
Well, a a whole lot has changed since 2016. But I'm adapted. I'm adapted to it because now I know technology. I know how to take care of myself and so forth. But um, I think my mission was just to just try to bring some resolve to the situation, some understanding, some true understanding about the consequences, the end results of working off that trauma, you know. And so in prison, when I was getting ready to go up for parole, I well, actually, when I first went up for parole, I was denied for 3 years because they said I didn't have enough showing to show what I was doing about my gang addiction. Okay, um, but it was to be expected because I wasn't no good prisoner, so to speak. Like I had two files of issues, of my issues. So, and I had a high risk psychological evaluation. So I already knew that I wasn't gonna get out. It was just my first time actually going in, and so when I went in and spit my spiel and they denied me, I went back and that's how I created Affiliates and Offenders Recovery Program, because I needed to show what I was doing about my quote unquote gang addiction, what I was doing, to address my issues. So I began writing organizations out here like Detours, Ben Owens, a cat. What's that? There's another cat. The violence, the violence.
Stop the violence, increase the peace.
Yes.
Khalid Shaw.
Yeah. Khalid Shaw, right? So I was writing all of these people, and so I began to get an understanding of what I wanted to do once if I had got granted parole, uh, and so when they denied me, I went back and I helped I researched the Criminal and Gang Members Anonymous. So when I researched them, they wasn't still active, but I was able to get an understanding of what it was, and then I petitioned to have that program at Calipatria, a facility, which I had to go through a whole lot of barriers because they didn't want, because it was coming from me. I was still active on the yard. I was still, and this is coming from me after I got denied parole, and so I had to do a petition where I had all the races, uh, everybody on the yard sign it, and then they called me in for a meeting amongst the goon squad, the captain, and everybody at Calipatria 8 facility. And I went in, and the goon squad was telling me, man, I was telling them that, hey, they said I need to get this, get these programs, because they're denying individuals because you're not showing what you're doing about your game. but there's no programs like that on the level 4 general population yards. So me bringing that to them, they had the reservations about it, right? So the goon squad captain, Sergeant Dude said, well, how we supposed to, believe you when you got 10 people outside the door still calling you a shot caller? I responded that, I have no control about how other people see me. Like I don't care about that anymore, of how people see me. I'm telling you that in order for people here on this general population be able to address the causative factors of their commitment offenses, then we need this program on the facility. And that was the CGA program. And so it ended up being granted, right? So, and I began to facilitate. So that's how I first began learning how to facilitate a group of men.
And so now out here with your organization, how do you function on a day-to-day or week-to-week basis?
Because I do what I do what I'm doing in my personal life as well as my professional life. So it's hand in hand. I assist people with resources to housing, court-ordered volunteers, like mental health, drug and alcohol, wherever, just providing these services. Of course, I'm not the big organization that has a lot of people. I get that, and they got the funding to do that, but it's just not about the funding with me. You know what I'm saying? Like I pray to God to come back and do what it is that I'm doing, like day in and day out, like week after week, like month after month, like year after year, like decade after decade, like for just one chance. Like give me one chance to let me see what it's like out there again. Like I left, and I was a kid, and I understand what I did. I understand what I was doing to my people. I can't understand that before I walked out of prison. I retired from active duty 8-month Thursday 2014. I walked out of prison April 2016, because I was now about my people. It was no longer only about where I'm my own trait. You understand?
Yes, sir.
I'm a man, right? And so I haven't. And like I told my general when I wrote the letter to everybody about my decision, I was supported by my general Spike, and all the rest of them, because that's who raised me. But my whole thing was that you guys didn't need me here no more. Y'all don't need me here no more. The people on the street need me. They need to hear the truth about about what we are seeing right here. Ron them from Safeties and Hammer Hands and Ghosts from 90s and the homies from Hoover. All these, like we all was there, and I never had to go through none of that. You understand? So it was just important for me to come back and articulate that in a way for the masses to be able to understand it. You understand? Like because we wrapped up in an addiction over things that had taken place early on through youth that wasn't developed, that didn't have conflict resolve, right? That didn't. So we took that and we expanded it, to self-mutilation, right? Under one banner, like still represent the banner while mutilating each other, which is, so I just believe that I had to conquer that before I stepped out here.
Let me ask you something. You strike me as a man who's been transformed. Can you talk a little bit about that transformation and how, I'm assuming there's a transformation. You can use another word if you like, but I see a transformed man, and I bet myself and others who are looking for a way out are looking for a way to transform. Can you describe a little bit of how it took place?
I think one of the I think I began to transform when I realized that I had been in prison 20 years, you know, amongst the same rivals who I was convicted for, right? And these dudes were my brothers, you know. And so I what had happened, I think it was probably